Father, thank you for your amazing grace. Thank you for Mike Adams and his ministry. Well, your ministry through him. And I pray you'd add your blessing to what was done in these handful of days. Lord, you know each one of us, what we thought about what he was saying, whether we responded in our hearts or not. But Father, to everybody that did make some response, would you just add your blessing to it and multiply grace through it and do something to strengthen us together with it. And those that didn't, would you speak to them as well? You don't have to use Michael Adams to speak to anybody. You can speak yourself pretty clear, and so we pray you do that. But help us, Father, as a body, I pray, to walk with you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. So, this is another one. So I sent every, I sent y'all in Unpopulate. I think everybody got this, the study guide. So I just put the questions down there. So, So I'm not answering these questions for you. They're in your notes. They're not really necessarily in order. But I had to, in order to do this effectively, I had to construct a test. So I didn't grade papers. I worked on this until early this morning. Hopefully it's reasonable. There are, on the exam coming on Monday, there are 30 questions. There are 24 multiple choice, like you have 4 choices and you choose the best one. They're not really tricks. Some of them, one could be, but the other one could be so much better. And then there are 6 true and false, or yes or no. So I took away, because I'm doing this class async as well, and I didn't know about testing. I've never done testing on Populate. I've just done it on paper. So I don't know how it works, so I eliminated all the short answer, much to probably many of your joy that I don't have you actually thinking out loud. It's just a matter of guessing, hopefully not so much. And then there are 4 extra credit problems. In addition to the 30 problems, there's 4 additional ones that are extra credit. So, on test day, which is on Monday, I will be here. I guess I could be here after lunch. So if anybody would come in early, if you're a test taker that takes a long time, then come in early. Because there's somebody coming in after this class just like slap bang. So, nobody has a class after lunch before this, or do you? Anybody? Okay, so you can come in whatever you want. I'm not requiring you to come in. But this class shuts down at 2:40 when Rebecca comes in. And so if you're slow at taking a test, you come in early. When you finish the test, you can leave. You don't have to stay around till everybody's done. As soon as you finish the test, you can skedaddle out of here. So that's this. This is pretty self-explanatory. I'm saying some but not all are science stuff. I would assume that if you did this study guide that you would do pretty well in the test. So I'm giving it to you now so you have more than just overnight to, that's why I thought it was pertinent to do, to get it to you before waiting till Friday. So there you have it. So you have it, I think, did you get it twice? Did you get this stuff twice? Anybody on Populate? You did? Okay, because I sent it to this class first, and then I went to the async class and I sent it, and after I sent it, It didn't have the usual thing that I get when I've sent it to everybody, so I can uncheck them. It didn't do that. So I think I might have sent it to everybody that was in this class. So you might have gotten it twice, I apologize for that. But that's that deal. Plus you got, I think I have this, so I don't need this anymore. If you have any questions about this stuff, I'm still free to add, to talk to, let me see. Yeah, so you also got this one. So this is an extra credit. So for extra credit, the following article, which is down below, is to be read completely with a thoughtful response from you comparing this piece to 2 Timothy 2:15 and what may be gained by its application. Okay? So 2 Timothy 2:15, you look at that, you read this, you see what are connectors or what could be, and you talk about them. So I don't want you to use Google, AI, commentaries, or anything else. I don't want you to use outside sources. Just your own brain power. Just thinking about this. This thing, Agassiz, Louis Agassiz, was well, you'll read here. Tells us who he was. So it was written by one of his students. And I got it. I took Isaiah Jeremiah, the first semester I was here, or second, and my professor there passed a paper out, and I really liked what it said. I liked how he went about it. He was thinking, and he put his student to thinking. And I found following this pattern very rewarding in my study of Scripture, and pretty much that's what I'm having you. That's what I'm making the connection with. So I think it's not a hard read. It's like, I think this whole thing is 3 pages. So you can do that and then write something about it, and that's to be returned. That's to be turned in Friday, February 14th. So you got some time to do that if you want to. You know, this is not required. This is just extra credit. It's not the extra credit that I did before, but I think this was, I was praying, and this occurred to me, and I Googled the guy, and it came up. I looked for a while until I found this description, and then I thought, well, that's pretty cool. So that's what we're doing. We're doing that. So you had one handout that we didn't get through, which was this one, this little 1-pager. And we didn't get through the bottom part of it. We got through the top part. Did we get through? Or did we get through any of it?
We didn't get through any of it.
We didn't get it, okay, good. So we're good. Fine with that. So that's these. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna do this. Okay, so atheistic theories of the Earth's development. Naturalistic evolution. So what is this? Darwinistic, where evolution proceeds at a slow, continuous pace. What is that sometimes called? Begins with a U. Uniformitarianism.
Yeah.
Things proceed like they always have. You observe nature happening, and that's how things happened, and that's how they've always happened. And so that is not held as vehemently because a slow, continuous pace, they have found so much, especially Mount St. Helens, I think I mentioned that before, I know I have, that it doesn't. So that's naturalistic evolution believes that the only process is there's no divine intervention in this stuff. It's only what we see, just nature. Punctuated equilibrium, which is macroevolution, where that's species to species. You have one species here, you have a dog that grows wings. That's an extreme example. An evolutionist would say that's too extreme, but basically in millions and millions of years, or billions, that something like that they believe would be reasonable to think happened. Well, that's macroevolution on a rapid pace in brief periods. So you don't have anything, then all of a sudden, which is punctuated. Things are happening, and then all of a sudden, big change, and that's what they use to explain or justify evolution in the absence of fossil transitional forms, because they don't have those. There is something I saw just yesterday. By Kurt Warner, who worked for, I don't know, 20 or 30 years to look at the fossil record, particularly fossils relating to mankind, like Neanderthal man, Piltdown man, the different transitional forms, supposedly, of mankind. So he and his wife traveled all over the world. They got into museums and took pictures of a lot of these original, not the ones that are on display, but the originals. So they did that. They didn't do it in all of them, but they did them in some. So, and what they found at least 140 frauds. The model that they were purporting was one thing, had been, like the cranium capacity had been expanded. The Neanderthal, yeah. That there's so many frauds out there. Now, I think the guy is credible, but I just saw, but he's put out a series on this. We don't have time to watch it. But if I can get a copy of the series and have the library get it, it was really interesting. The one, he did some illustration about what they found and how they've changed them. You guys? Are you doing earth science or something else?
I'm going to put a document for notes.
Okay, well, you had your attention of the girl next to you, which is not good. But it was very interesting. I've never heard anybody that had done such research, and apparently he had done a lot of research, and they had photographs, they had comparisons of what they said it was and what it wasn't. It's not that all paleontologists or people that are studying the fossil record of humanoids are deceitful, but it was amazing to hear him talk, and he wasn't bashing. I mean, a couple of them, the people that worked with him were calling them out as fraudulent. So it was so all that we see isn't necessarily gospel, just because a museum, in fact, some museums would not let them see the original. And there was one fellow that's really strong on this one thing but he wouldn't let anybody see it. Nobody can see it. And the supposition is, if you're hiding it from everybody so they can't see, and it's part of this may not mean anything to you, but where the spine goes into the skull. Well, with a human, it's ahead of where it does with an ape. I think that's it. I think it's farther back with an ape or ahead with a human, or vice versa.
I think the human is further.
Is further ahead.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. So some of them they found have been changed. Because if they're saying they found a transitional form of a humanoid, then if the spine was going into its skull at the same place it does an ape, that's a little, well, so they've done some changing in that thing. So not everybody, but he found many illustrations of that. So, punctuated equilibrium, sorry, I didn't mean to get that. Punctuated equilibrium holds that genetic change occurs relatively rapidly on a geological timescale. That could be millions of years. And these shorter periods of evolution are sandwiched between longer periods of stasis, meaning nothing was happening, little or no change. This view of evolutionary change stands in contrast to Darwin's traditional view of gradualism, where the evolution of process at a slow, continuous pace. The punctuated model punctuation model states that species do not rise as an entire population evolves, but rather when a segment of population becomes isolated and undergoes a speciation event. So they're trying to say, okay, we came from, we're really diverse, there's no transitional forms that are clearly transitional. There's some that have been spouted as, but over time, if you look carefully, they have been they've been proved to be false, erroneous. I put these, so I didn't do it after class. I did it either last night or this morning. So I put the notes for the last couple classes, this stuff here, I put those on. If you go to lessons, you have a whole list of blah, 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 lesson. They're numbered. If you go to your syllabus, that's, when I try to get organized, I do a good job and then I have absolutely no idea where I am. But on this, on the syllabus, there's this page. And it has a number down the side, and it has the topic of discussion. And so we discussed that stuff with last time. Our last class was class number 8. It was on the 3rd of February, which was Monday. And it was Genesis and Creation, part 6. So if you go to part 6 in your lesson, and I had never done lessons ever before, not in a class I never even know they existed. But Richard, Dr. E told me that they did, and that I should put some in, especially for the async class. So I've done that in hit and miss. But for you all, Chelsea asked if I would put those on. So those are on for last class, and I put them on for the class before. So I know on Friday's class and Monday's class, both are there under lessons, and one's in Genesis and Creation part 5, and one in part 6, and today's will be part 7, and I'll put this stuff up there too. I'll just copy it, and it'll be, you go to lessons, you go to that lesson and click on it, and it'll have it. It's also, I also put it on under files, the syllabus, and then you go to the right-hand side, and you got links. So the class is in the links. If you wanted to watch the class again, God forbid, that you would do that. But then if you wanted the files, they're under files, and it's there too. Because I didn't know where to put it, and when I finally figured it out, I'd already put it in one other place. So that's what I've done. However, under punctuated model, only a small segment of the parent population buds off into the descent population, permitting the original parent population to continue to persist. I mean, they're trying to figure out how to explain what they see, what the evidence that they have coming from a naturalistic worldview, that there was no creator, there was no supernatural business going on at all. It was just naturalistic. So they try to explain what they're seeing here without a creator creating, and so that's why they're dodging around with this thing. So, the definition of world evolution is taken on two different meanings that are not equal. Evolution can be used in the sense of change in species by natural selection, Darwin's observation of finch beaks in Galapagos Island, or dogs, or anything else that we see all the time. This is often referred to microevolution and is accepted by evolutionists and creationists as good observational science. There's no problem with that idea, with that kind of evolution, microevolution. Now, some evolutionists, or some people believe in evolution, do not put the micro and macro in front of it. They just say it's evolution. But it's two different things. It's two different, because creationists believe in this kind of change among species. They don't believe in changes within species, change from one species to another. You change from dogs to birds with 4 feet. That's a species change. They don't have the genetic material is not there for a dog to develop wings. It's just not. It doesn't exist you can get mutations that change it, but they don't change to develop all that would need to be developed. So that's macroevolution. Micro is the original dog, they'd have been a wolf, or wolf-like. And then over time, if it's in different places, there's genetic changes within the species that have long hair, short hair, whatever. So, this type of evolution, microevolution, allows for change within the boundaries of created kinds or groups, but not between groups. The other meaning of evolution involves the idea that all organisms on Earth share common ancestor by descent with modification. So we all came from, well, typically you would say, kind of in a sarcastic way, we all came from pond scum. So this hypothetical idea is commonly referred to as macroevolution, which asserts that changes between groups does take place, though it has never been observed, nor does it have any basis in operational science. This thing has never been observed. So, that's this one. Now, I passed this out, although I didn't know we'd have time to go through it all. I printed it out because I know how to do that on our machine, and I have access that's kind of been factored in. I don't know if people know I have access, but anyway, so that's why you have blue here on this sheet, because it was done in color for your benefit. So, normally, where there's blue, you would have underlines and you would be hurriedly scratching in the little words that goes in there. But to keep this tidy, I've done this. So I'm just going to talk about this. Some of this stuff you will need to know as we go forward. Okay, here we are. Theories of the Earth's development. So these are where the biblical account, what we read in Scripture, is adjusted to accommodate science. Theistic evolution is the overall category. So they believe that all evolution is true, but divinely initiated in the beginning. So God started things, and functionally, then he, at least one view of this, is God started everything. God was there in the beginning, he started everything, and then he stepped back, and it's rolled along as evolutionists would claim. That you have 13.7 billion years ago, these things happened. They don't follow the sequence in Genesis, but they believe that God started these things. And you can be a theistic evolutionist and be a Christian, a follower of Christ. That is certainly a possibility. I've met people that I had good fellowship with and were friends with, but they believed that God started the thing, and then, now some of them believe that God still does intervention, he does healing, he does supernatural things, but anyway. So that's theistic evolution. God may have either started the evolutionary process and left it to actual process, or made it guided the evolutionary process. So one of those things. A framework hypothesis. Now this might be good to remember. The idea that the Bible, when it speaks of things historic or scientific, is to be understood in a theological sense only. It's just promoting the theological idea of these things. It's assuming that God was involved but not actually recorded. So Genesis is not to be taken as history. For a framework hypothesis, Genesis is not to be taken as factual history. It's illustrating something else. Okay. Day-age theory. Days of Genesis are not literal 24-hour days, but a long period, eons of time, which correspond to the major periods of evolutionary geological history. Now, I don't know, I've not talked to somebody that believed that personally. To ask them then how they would account to the order of things. I would rather talk to somebody that doesn't want to argue about it. The fellow I went to the Democratic Republic of Congo last summer with, he was a Pentecostal, and his group was Pentecostal, except for me. Well, it was really wonderful. I mean, we roomed together, and I could ask him questions about Pentecost, because some things happened, not anything really weird, but some things that I wouldn't, why do you do this? And so I asked him, we didn't get in an argument, we just discussed it. It was really nice. So it'd be interesting to talk to somebody that believes in the scriptures, but then discounts this and puts in those days. What do they do with the order that it was created? Do they say, okay, well, that isn't true either? So not only is Genesis not true, it wasn't 24-hour days, but the order that they're in is not true, because the evolutionary, as we went through, the evolutionary order of events in God creating is certainly does not fit in at all with the evolutionary presentation of the same material. This happened here in one when God says this happened first. Well, so if you're holding on to science, then you've got to discount the whole part of Genesis in some way. And I think it'd be interesting to find out somebody that I could talk with and try to get my mind around how they're getting there. So sometimes 6 literal days of creation are accepted, but each day was followed by long ages of slow development in the style of Orthodox historical geology. So you had 6 literal days, but you had day 1, and then you had a long time. Then you had day 2, another long time. Then you had day 3 and another long time. And I still don't see how that would plug in to how God set things in order. Because the fact is, God created the sun, and the moon, and the stars on day 4. Well, that doesn't fit with any evolutionary model. And vegetation was on day 3. So how does that fit in with anything? Well, it doesn't. But I'd like to talk to somebody that would discuss that reasonably and not just want to argue. So, progressive creation, that's day age, same kind of thing. God performed creative acts along the geological way. So thus evolution did not produce all the forms of life. God intervened. Hit life right here. It didn't come in an evolutionary way, but God did something in it, and they changed the meaning of the day in the creation account from a single rotation of the earth to long, indefinite periods. So they don't have days in there, they have long periods, millions, perhaps hundreds of millions. There's a lot of variation with this, just like in Orthodox Christianity, there are a lot of people that hold slightly different beliefs that have all been washed in the blood, know Jesus personally. And then there are a whole group out of there that don't at all, but they have the religious trapping. They have the form of godliness, but without the, or some of them don't even have that without the power. So, standard gap theory, believe that an indefinitely long time span exists somewhere in the first 2 verses of Genesis. Okay, this is kind of important to understand. There in Genesis, if you're going to put a lot of time in, you're going to rule out. You've got to put a lot of time in to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So there's 2 places you can put that in. You can put it in before Genesis 1. So then you're not really, it's not a gap. It's before Genesis 1. There was, Lucifer was created. There was stuff happening. There was a calamity. The earth was left void. And so when we start in Genesis 1, we're starting something that was already there that God was having to reform because it had crashed. Something like that. And then the next place that you'd put it in is between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. So there's 2 places that you'd put a long time, infinitely long span time. The 2 major options are before Genesis 1:1, and advocates of this theory claim there is no gap, but something just happened before that we don't have any record of. I mean, they can go to Revelation, they can go to the fall of Lucifer, something happened and they're speculating that, well, the earth was there, or there was something earth-like, and God had to take care of it because it was wicked, and then we start again. But the second option inserts time between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. So there's a little break where God speaks, and then you get a time period here. And this theory believes that Genesis 1 speaks of original earth that existed over an indefinite period of time in the past. Verse 2 is taken to speak of the destruction of that earth, and the rest of the chapter to speak of its destruction and reconstruction. This is probably called the gap theory, because it proposes a gap in the narrative. So there are these without a gap, but before Genesis 1, there was something in existence, millions of years or however, whatever, long time, and then you have between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. One explains one thing, and then the next one talks about the recovery. And then modified gap theory. All geological phenomena except the creation of warm-blooded life were accomplished during this, excuse me, the period given in Genesis 1:1 time. Changes took place in the earth, but no gap destruction, until God began formation of man's world with birds, whales, etc. God, over millions of years, prepared the earth for man. So the earth was under modification for millions of years before man was created and put on it. And there are probably lots more. These are just some of the main ones. And the main ones, the standard gap theory, you need to know where that is. The framework hypothesis, where it discounts Genesis altogether, just thinks it's something other than it says. Progressive creationism the same as theistic evolution? Well, they have similarities, both call on God to start creation, both accept the tenets of evolution, both accept validity of geological age systems, and both postulate an old earth. But progressive creationism allows God a little more to do in the system, whereas theistic evolution, God starts it all and then steps back to watch it roll. And there are spins of each of these, but this is a generalization. That's what this all is. You can find people that might believe a little bit differently here, but that's a generalization where they are. There's little widespread agreement among progressive creationists. Okay, they generally believe the following: the Big Bang is interpreted as God's way of producing stars and galaxies through billions of years of natural process. So the Big Bang was true, but God did it. The earth, the universe of billions of years old, day of creation, were overlapping periods, millions of years. Death and bloodshed have existed from the very beginning of creation, were not the result of Adam's sin. Man was created after the vast majority of Earth's history of life and death had already taken place. The flood of Noah was a local, not global flood. So, and I'd like to talk to somebody that believed that, because it just doesn't, there's so many things, the reasons at least, that I can understand that a global flood would be. If it was a local flood, well, you just get the animals out of where they were gonna flood. You wouldn't need to build a boat the size that you build if it's a local thing. There are a lot of things about a local flood that don't make sense with scripture to me, but I am looking through a lens, and I see what I understand to be biblical position, and that's how I'm looking at it. And so some of this stuff, I just don't get it. And I can read this and say, okay, but why they believe that, that's what, and there are people that do. There are people that are famous that, I think Hugh Ross is, he's academically qualified, but having academic qualifications don't necessarily get you. You cannot be a seeker after God and get straight A's. You can advance, you can have a PhD in the Asbury revival. Well, if you remember prayer class, you saw that, you might have seen it on. The guy, a professor, he went through Asbury, went out, he got his PhD, came back and taught at Asbury. He was devoid of a real experience. He backslid. So he was living and teaching. In fact, one of the clearest testimonies was his getting up and apologizing to the faculty, the staff, and all the student body, saying that he had been backslidden, he wasn't even walking with God, and so he apologized. I don't know if he was the one that apologized for not making an effort in his classes. You had professors that were being honest in front of everybody about not being where they should be. Well, he was one. So you can have a PhD that are bankrupt in their faith, that are living sinful lives, just like you can have preachers. Unfortunately, they fall all the time. Rabbi Zacharias, I have quotes of his. Man, what a tragedy to just wash out. So brilliant and so kind. That was one thing, when he spoke to people that were even angry, he was kind. I appreciate that. Having somebody that's ranting about what they believe in and is unkind to other people, whether they're there or not, that says something that's not the spirit of Christ. You don't have to badmouth somebody. I want to be careful. Even these things that I don't believe, I want to be careful about badmouthing the people that do. How could I hope to connect with somebody if I'm badmouthing them? It seems inconsistent. So, I have a plan. So, okay. Now, so if you're sleepy, resist the temptation. This is 5 minutes, 51 seconds, and it won't hurt you. But no pain, no gain.
There you go.
So there may be some, I don't know what it would be. This is PragerU. I don't know if you looked this stuff about it.
Evolution. You learned about it in high school. It goes like this. Life started out with very simple forms, and then gradually, over hundreds of millions of years, morphed into all the forms we see today. Bacteria to Beethoven. Not a straight line, of course, but that's roughly how it went. This was the theory proposed by Charles Darwin in 1859, and with some modification, it's been embraced as unassailable by the scientific community over the last century. As evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins says, if you meet somebody who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is either ignorant, stupid, or insane. But is that right? Are there no scientific reasons to doubt the evolutionary account of life's origins? In November 2016, I attended a conference in London convened by some of the world's leading evolutionary biologists. The purpose? To address growing doubts about the modern version of Darwin's theory. Let's look at just two scientific reasons to doubt this theory. First, the Cambrian explosion. A weird and wonderful thing happened 530 million years ago. A whole bunch of major groups of animals, what scientists call the phyla, appeared abruptly within a geologically short window of time, about 10 million years. These novel animal forms, exhibiting prototypes of most animal body designs we see today, emerged in the fossil record without evidence of earlier ancestors. Did you catch that? A huge number of diverse animals appeared with no discernible antecedents. So where did they come from? This question really bothered Darwin, and he acknowledged that he could give it no satisfactory answer. Nor can scientists today. The renowned biologist Eugene Koonin of the National Center for Biotechnology Information describes the abrupt appearance of the Cambrian animals and other organisms, such as dinosaurs, birds, flowering plants, and mammals, as a pattern of biological Big Bangs. So what caused all these new forms of life to arise? That question leads to a second big doubt, the DNA enigma. In the 1950s, James Watson and Francis Crick made a startling discovery. The DNA molecule stores information as a 4-character digital code. Strings of precisely sequenced chemicals inside the DNA helix store the instructions, the information, for building the crucial proteins that cells need to survive. Unless the chemical letters in the DNA text are sequenced properly, a protein molecule will not form. No proteins, no cells. No cells, no living organisms. Bill Gates has said DNA is like a software program. Let's think about that for a second. For computers to run faster and perform more functions, they require new code. Well, the same is true for life. To build new forms of life, the evolutionary process would need to produce new genetic information, new code. But this raises questions about the creative power of natural selection and mutation. Natural selection is a simple sorting process. Species keep favorable mutations that allow them to survive, but eliminate bad mutations that cause their members to die out. No one doubts that natural selection is a real process, and that it produces minor variations. But many biologists now doubt that it produces major innovations in biological form. To see why, think again about software. What happens if you introduce a few random changes into computer code? You'll likely mess it up, right? Though it might still work if you don't make too many changes. But if you make enough random changes, your program will stop functioning altogether. You certainly can't keep doing this and expect some cool new program to pop out. There's a mathematical reason for this. In all codes and languages, there are vastly more ways of arranging characters that will generate gibberish than there are arrangements that will generate meaningful sequences. And this applies to DNA. Remember, natural selection only selects sequences that random mutations generate. Yet experiments have established that DNA sequences capable of making stable proteins are extremely rare, and thus really hard to stumble on randomly. How rare? While working at Cambridge University, molecular biologist Douglas Ack showed that for every DNA sequence that generates a relatively short functional protein, there are 10 to the 77th power non-functional sequences. Now consider that there are only 10 to the 65th power atoms in our galaxy. So finding a new DNA sequence capable of building a functional protein is like searching blindfolded for a single marked atom among a trillion Milky Way galaxies. Talk about a needle in a haystack. As I show in my book, Darwin's Doubt, even 4 billion years of life's history is not enough time to overcome a search problem this big. So 2 serious doubts about modern Darwinian theory. The Cambrian explosion, the sudden appearance of new animals, which evolutionary theory has failed to explain, and the DNA enigma. the implausibility of random mutations producing the information needed to build new forms of animal life. Scientists who know about these problems are not ignorant, stupid, or insane. They are just appropriately skeptical. I'm Stephen Meyer, Senior Fellow at the Discovery Institute for Prager University.